All right. What is going on, everybody? It is currently 6:23 p.m. Thursday, January 25th. Lots to talk about. So let's start with some NFL coaching news. The big one, obviously, is that Jim Harbaugh has accepted the head coaching position with the Los Angeles Chargers. And I got to give him credit. They did it. I didn't think they would. Uh, just the Chargers, the Spanish family, they are notoriously cheap. I really was in a scenario where I was like, I'll believe it when I see it with the Chargers. And I'm not surprised he took Harbaugh, that is, took a meeting with them. That was the most attractive job opening, in my opinion. And, you got a pretty good roster there. You got Justin Herbert there. Really only needed a couple players, and that roster can compete in the AFC and a coach like Harbaugh. So I wasn't surprised he met with them. And then there was rumors or a report of a second meeting, and I was like, let's see if this goes sideways at this point. And it didn't. And kudos. Hang on, I got it on my laptop. Kudos to the Spanish family. At some point, you got to pay money. They're a notoriously cheap organization throughout their history, and they managed to do it. This is huge for the Chargers. They now have. I was talking about it with James earlier this week. Uh, I asked him, Harbaugh has experience in the NFL. He was successful in the NFL. I don't think that gets talked about enough. Like, he didn't get run out of the NFL because he wasn't winning. He had one bad year, and it was 8-8, and he, didn't get along with the owner, general manager, whoever it was. Uh, but he had success. He went to a Super Bowl. He went to, I think, 3 straight NFC championships. And then the last year was kind of a disaster. But I texted James and I asked him, is Harbaugh a top 5 NFL head coach right now? Jim, not John. And he said, I don't think so. And I was like, you're probably right. But honestly, if you ranked the head coaches in the NFL, Belichick's out now, and I'm not sure he's going to get a job. Uh, you would put Andy Reid probably 1, Shanahan or McVay probably 2 or 3, 2 and 3. You would probably throw John Harbaugh in there as for top 5. But then, like, who are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? Pete Carroll's gone. I would put Matt LaFleur in there. I would put. Now I'm not thinking. I'm not able to think of anybody. Maybe a Sean McDermott, and who I'll get to in a bit with the Bills. Um, Possibly Dan Campbell. Like, it's not that long of a list, and I would probably put Harbaugh above Matt LaFleur. Like, he might be a top 5 NFL head coach right now. Granted, it's been a decade since he hasn't been in the NFL. It's a different league now. I'm curious to see what kind of staff he puts together, but I think this is a great move by the Chargers. He's gonna bring a physicality to the Chargers that they really haven't had since the Schottenheimer days. Uh, I'm really looking forward to see what they do in the draft, because this is a team that probably wants offensive playmakers, but knowing Harbaugh, I think he's going to want dudes in the trenches. Beef up the O line, beef up the D line. They're already a prime candidate to trade back in the draft. But I'm really curious to see how this goes. Chargers got a good one. Chargers now, I would say, Super Bowl contender. AFC just got better. That's the main takeaway. AFC just got better, and it was already deep. You already have the best quarterback head coach combination in the league in the AFC with Mahomes and Reed. Taylor and Burrow are pretty good. McDermott and Allen are pretty good. Harbaugh and Lamar are pretty damn good. That's 4. Now you add Harbaugh and Justin Herbert to the mix. Like, that's 5 of the top 10 NFL and the NFL head coach quarterback combinations all in one conference. I think DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud are in the mix. So AFC is going to be a gauntlet, man. And I'm really interested to see how this plays out over the next decade. I was surprised Harbaugh went to the AFC. I thought he would go to the NFC to try to not compete with his brother, but I'm not surprised he went with the Chargers. It's LA, California, really nice area. He's had a lot of success in California. He won at San Diego. He won at Stanford. He won with the 49ers. It makes sense. So moving on. The next one is the Atlanta Falcons hire Raheem Morris. And I'm surprised by this. All signs had been pointing to Bill Belichick going to the Falcons. And this is a little bit of a surprise. It clearly tells me that Belichick didn't see eye to eye with the Falcons ownership and Arthur Blank. I think that because he had at least one meeting, maybe two with the Falcons. I think Harbaugh even had two meetings with the Falcons. And I think it's safe to say that Belichick didn't want to give up power. Like he wanted to have personnel. He wanted to make personnel decisions. And I don't think the Falcons were willing to give him that. Either that or they were just that blown away with Raheem Morris, which could be possible. I don't think Raheem Morris is a bad hire. It was just surprising. I thought it would be Belichick. All signs seem to point to it being Belichick, and now it's Raheem Morris. Not a bad hire for Atlanta. I think Raheem Morris is highly thought of. He's from the McVay coaching tree. He's done a pretty good job with the Rams defense the last few years. But now, where does Belichick end up? Every job, I think, but two are filled. Seattle doesn't have a coach yet, and neither does Washington. But all signs seem to be pointing to Ben Johnson going to Washington, which makes sense because the new owner in Washington, I forget his name, is stripping the whole thing down, which is the right move because Dan Snyder was a disaster. His front office was a disaster. The team was a disaster. The culture was a disaster. And this dude, and I really respect it, is just coming in and getting rid of everybody. He is stripping the whole thing down to the foundation, and he's going to build it up, and I love it. He hired Adam Peters, which is a really good hire. Adam Peters is a highly thought of personnel guy to be the GM. Great move. He hired, I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, a guy from the Golden State Warriors that basically built up the Golden State Warriors dynasty to come to the organization in some capacity. I think that's a really smart move. Bring a championship culture there. And if he does land Ben Johnson, that's a really good hire. Ben Johnson was the best coordinator on the market. And now you can go into the offseason with a first-year GM, a first-year head coach, get younger at the quarterback position because they're taking a quarterback with the second pick, and really set yourself up for these two to be, or three guys to be in lockstep for the foreseeable future. And I think that's a brilliant move. I can't be more impressed with what I've seen in Washington. Talk about a complete culture change. And I think that's going to fit the organization. Who else got hired? Brian Callahan, the Cincinnati offensive coordinator, was hired by the Tennessee Titans. This might be my least favorite of the hires so far. That or Raheem Morris. Or I'm sorry, the Carolina, which I'll get to the Carolina hire in a bit. This one might be my least favorite. It's that or the Carolina opening. It doesn't do a whole lot for me. Like, Cincinnati has done a really good job offensively the last couple of years, but you have to look at who they have. It was like when a couple of years ago, like a decade ago, a lot of teams tried to poach Green Bay offensive assistants. Like, I remember Miami hired the offensive coordinator, which was Joe Philbin, to be their head coach. I can remember the Giants hiring Big McAdoo to be their offensive coordinator and eventual head coach. And I just kept thinking, like, guys, they're not the real brainchild here. The real brainchild is Mike McCarthy. And you can say what you want about Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy's a good coach. And he was a good play caller. I think the game has just passed him by. But he was the real brainchild. He was the true offensive guru in Green Bay. and he had Aaron Rodgers. And I think the similar thing is happening in Cincinnati, where the true offensive mind in Cincinnati, I think, is Zach Taylor, who has really impressed me as a head coach. Now, I could end up being totally wrong, and Brian Callahan knows what he's doing. It's not a bad hire, but I'm just like, if you're trying to replicate what you got or what he did in Cincinnati, you're just not going to get it, because they have Joe Burrow, a top 5 quarterback in the game. They have Zach Taylor, who's top 10 head coach in the game. So it's just, I don't know how to feel about it. It's not a bad hire. It's just, I'm lukewarm about it, I would say. Carolina hires, I don't remember his name, Dan something, Canales. Let me look it up. Head coach. Dave, I'm sorry, Canales. So, again, this is another one. This might be my least favorite one now that I think about it. The offensive coordinator, he was the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, and he did a really good job. I'll give him credit, building Baker Mayfield up and doing some good things with that offense, but they couldn't run the ball, and that's a big issue. Now, maybe it was the personnel. In Tampa, that's a team that really hasn't been able to run the ball. Even when they had Tom Brady, they really weren't able to run the ball that well. So maybe it's just the personnel and the organization's fault for that. But I will give him his flowers. Like, he's clearly not a bad coordinator. But head coach? I don't know. And this goes back to my point that I made a couple weeks ago. I thought Carolina was going to have a really hard time interviewing for candidates, or finding quality candidates. I believe Ben Johnson interviewed for the job last year, and I know he interviewed for the Houston job. And I don't remember seeing that this time around, and Ben Johnson's from that area, if I recall correctly. And I don't remember who the biggest name was that they interviewed. Maybe Raheem Morris, but they weren't. I don't think they were able to get Harbaugh. I don't think they were able to get Vrabel. I highly doubt they were able to get Belichick on the phone. And it just proves my point that Carolina is in a bit of trouble. So I don't blame them. While you sold the farm, basically, to get Bryce Young, you might as well see what you got with him and try to get an offensive coordinator who did a good job with Baker Mayfield in Tampa. I'm just not sure it's going to amount to anything. I've made my point clear. I think Bryce Young's limited. He's not going to get much better than what he is right now. Like, you've blown it. You've blown it with him, and you needed him to be better his rookie year than what you got, and now you're to a point where I just don't think he's going to get any better. Not he'll get better. He should get better at least, but he's not going to be better than probably the 16th best quarterback in the game. He's physically limited. He can't really improve. He has a very low ceiling. So Carolina, you get what you pay for, and you dug yourself in this own hole. And by all accounts, it sounds like it was David Tepper who wanted Bryce Young, not the organization. So David Tepper slowly becoming, I don't even think slowly, I think he's quickly becoming the worst owner in the league right now. So while we have that out of the way, let's talk divisional round. So let's start this game, and that's Houston-Baltimore. Houston made this a close game. I thought we would, and I'll go back to what I said leading up to the week. I thought we were going to get an upset. By God, we almost got one. Now, I ended up going, I went 3-1. I picked the Bills in the games. But I felt like we were going to get an upset, and we almost got one. In this game, no less. Houston tied it 10-10, heading into halftime, but it never really, they were that serious of a threat. Sure, it probably made Baltimore fans sweat for a minute, but they couldn't really move the ball offensively. Their only touchdown was a special teams touchdown. Just Baltimore's really good defensively, and I just never really bought into Houston being able to pull off that upset at that point. It would have. Let me say this: it would have taken a lot, and I just didn't think it was going to happen. I figured Baltimore would wake up, and that's exactly what happened. Baltimore's really good, man. They're so well coached. they were, I don't want to say rusty in the first half, but it was clear they weren't ready to play. And the fact that they won by 24 points is pretty impressive considering the circumstances. They had basically 2 weeks off, and their defense was lights out. They held Houston's offense, which had been playing pretty well, and CJ Stroud, who was one of the hottest quarterbacks in the game, to 3 points. So Baltimore, man, really, really good. I want to go to San Francisco and Green Bay. So obviously, I had a vested interest in this game as a Packers fan. And I don't understand. Well, let me say this. I understand why the internet wants to mock the Packers because they lost to the 49ers again, and Bears fans are celebrating. And I had a buddy who was chirping about how much Green Bay sucks, and I could only just say to everybody, like, so what did you expect to happen? Green Bay was a 10-point favorite, or I'm sorry, not favorite. San Francisco was a 10-point favorite in this game. Green Bay shouldn't have even been there. And they had a 7-point lead entering the fourth quarter. In San Francisco, it had nothing to do with Russ. San Francisco couldn't play that night. The weather had an effect. And you can say San Francisco didn't bring its A game. Well, neither did Green Bay. They both brought like a C game. And Green Bay should have won. They didn't. I was bummed. I don't like losing to the 49ers. But this loss, honest to goodness, feels better than it did in 2012, than it did in 2013, than it did in 2019, and than it did in 2021. The talent disparity between Green Bay and San Francisco is not far off. It didn't appear that way anyway. Green Bay just needs another year of seasoning. They need another year or two of seasoning. But that, honest to goodness, felt like a tipping point in the NFC. San Francisco is not the bully that it used to be. Green Bay took it to them for 3.5 quarters. They were kicking their ass for 3.5 quarters. And it all changed when Zach Tom got hurt. Not many people are talking about that, but Green Bay's right tackle, Zach Tom, who has played at an all-pro level all season, got hurt. He didn't go back in for the last 4 drives of the game, and that really affected Green Bay's offense. Because Jordan Love, who was seeing the field pretty well at that point, his eyes, all of a sudden, from looking downfield, was focused primarily on the pass rush. And that's part of the reason why he fell apart down the stretch, and why Green Bay's offense fell apart down the stretch. So I'm not discouraged as a Green Bay fan, even though this makes us now 0-5 against the 49ers since 2012 in the playoffs. I'm not discouraged. I walk away from that game, and I think there's a really good chance Green Bay gets the monkey off its back in the near future. But you got to beat San Francisco in order to get to the Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers couldn't do it. Jordan Love almost did. And that game Saturday felt like a tipping point because San Francisco's core is getting older. Fred Warner will be entering his 7th year in the league, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 7th year. Christian McCaffrey will be entering his 8th. Trent Williams is already up there in age. Nick Bosa will be entering his 6th. Deebo Samuel will be entering his 6th. And then on top of that, do you really have a quarterback in Brock Purdy? In that game, I know Jordan Love threw 2 interceptions. One of them was horrendous. But I walk away from that game and I think Jordan Love outplayed Purdy, aside from one drive. Sorry, the Boston Bruins just scored a goal, so I wanted to watch. So San Francisco internet, enjoy this one because I'm not convinced you're going to be able to mock Green Bay for losing the 49ers again. No, I shouldn't say again, but they might lose one more. But once this core for Green Bay, I think, gets a couple years in them, like, I think things are going to change in the NFC. Honest to goodness, Aside from the AFC teams I mentioned earlier, Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati, I would throw the Chargers in there. What team has a better 5-year outlook than Green Bay right now? There really isn't one, especially in the NFC. Like I just said, San Francisco's core is getting older. You don't really know what you have in Brock Purdy. He's not bad, he's not great. And he really looked limited in the rain. And, if you're going to win in the NFC, you're likely going to have to go through Green Bay one day. And do you trust Brock Purdy to win that game? I don't know. But their core is getting older. Dallas has reached its ceiling with its core. Philadelphia is loaded with question marks right now. Are they going to improve? Is Jalen Hurts really as good as we thought he was in 2022? I think so. The Rams have an aging Matthew Stafford. Who's going to carry the NFC? Right now it's San Francisco. It could be Philadelphia. I don't think it's ever going to be Dallas now with this core. The next 5 years, it looks like it could be Green Bay. The only other team that comes close is Detroit. But even then, Detroit, you have a CEO head coach who doesn't call plays offensively or defensively. You're going to lose your offensive coordinator either this cycle or in the near future in Ben Johnson. And Dan Campbell has been able to put together a pretty good staff since he got there, so maybe he can replace him, but that's going to be a big question mark going into potentially next year. Look at what happened in Philadelphia. If you don't think this is a big deal, look at what happened in Philadelphia. Nick Sirianni doesn't call the plays. Shane Steichen did last year. They lost Shane Steichen. What happens? Indianapolis, who hired Shane Steichen, have a pretty good year. Philly falls apart down the stretch. And really shouldn't have won 11 games. They should have been worse. They won a lot of close games. And that's because I think they lost Shane Steichen. Sirianni didn't call the plays this year. He's a CEO coach, and he wasn't able to adequately replace Shane Steichen. The same thing could happen in Detroit. Plus, which quarterback do you think is better right now? I know we have a small sample size with Jordan Love. Right now, you could say Jared Goff is better. But in the next 5 years, I'm not sure you can make that argument. We'll see. This all could have been a Fugazi for Green Bay. And I'm spending way too long on this subject. I just want to make this clear. If you're taking a victory lap about the Packers losing to the Niners again, go touch some grass. Go outside, have some fresh air. They shouldn't have even been in that game, and you're going to mock them for losing the game, a game that they should have won as a 10-point dog. Get the fuck out of here. Go touch some grass. So I'm moving on. And this goes hand in hand with the next topic because I might as well talk about Buffalo, Kansas City. I've seen a lot of slander out there that the Bills have a Josh Allen problem. That's not the case. All right, let's just stop that narrative right now. The Bills don't have a Josh Allen problem. Buffalo's problem, I'm not even convinced the Bills have a Sean McDermott problem. Sean McDermott's a good coach. Is he a great coach? I don't know, but he's not a bad coach. Josh Allen, I think, is probably the second best quarterback in the game right now. You could argue Joe Burrow. You could argue Lamar. I think it's Josh Allen. And I know I'm the president, CEO, founder, co-founder, actually, James and I were talking about it, of the Josh Allen fan club. But he's right behind Mahomes. Buffalo's problem is not Sean McDermott. Buffalo's problem is not Josh Allen. Buffalo's problem is Patrick Mahomes. That's it. This is so eerily similar to what we saw from Tom Brady and Peyton Manning for years. For years, Manning couldn't get over the hump. He couldn't beat Brady. And it wasn't that Indianapolis had a Peyton Manning problem or that Indianapolis had a Tony Dungy problem. Indianapolis had a Tom Brady and a Bill Belichick problem. There's no shame in losing that game. Kansas City's really good. Yeah, it sucks to lose. They've had your number. Believe me, as a Green Bay fan, I know how that feels. When a team has your number in the playoffs, I know how it feels. It sucks. But at the same time, they have the better quarterback and they have the better head coach. Most of the time, that's going to lead to a victory for that team when you have the better quarterback and head coach. And Buffalo kept it close. What more could Josh Allen have done in that game to give the win to Buffalo or get the win for Buffalo? Yeah, like he missed a couple throws. But you know what would have been nice? If Stephon Diggs caught the long ball down the bottom sideline that went right through his hands. Buffalo's problem is they couldn't stop anybody. And that kind of falls under McDermott. I think he's the defensive play caller. I might be wrong about that. But they got to mix up they got to change the personnel. That defense is getting older. Jordan Poyer's in his 30s. Micah Hyde's in his 30s. Tre'Davious White is got to be in his 30s. He's entering his 8th year in the league. Von Miller signing was a disaster. Like, they really need to revamp their defense, and I think they need to get some better playmakers on the perimeter. I would move on from Stephon Diggs. I think he's a head case, and that's been kind of evident. Look at his days in Minnesota. Look at the drama he's created for the last year in Buffalo. The dude's a problem in the locker room. Just move on and talk about a dude who's getting older. He's well into his 30s. This will be his 10th season in the league. I didn't even realize that till today. So, Buffalo, I know this sucks. It was all right there for you to finally get over the hump with these guys. Don't be discouraged. The Super Bowl window has not closed. You still have, as long as you have a healthy 17, the window is open. I would revamp the roster, and that's the front office's job. I would get younger defensively. I'd invest in some pass catchers because I think you have 2 good running backs. This was finally the first time Buffalo's been able to run the ball. Who wasn't Josh Allen. Like, James Cook was able to run the ball. I think Frank Singletary was able to run the ball. They were getting push up front. And that's been Buffalo's downfall the last couple of years. The offensive line hasn't been that good. They weren't able to run the ball. But that wasn't the case this year. They were able to do those things. Now, get some pass catchers. I think you have 2 good tight ends. Go get some receivers. That's really preventing your offense from being truly great. And then defensively, I'd load up on athletes. Take a page out of Kansas City's playbook. They've loaded up on athletes defensively, and it's benefited them. So, Buffalo, you don't have a Josh Allen problem. And I'm tired of the internet saying so. So, what was the last game? Detroit, Tampa Bay. I mean, I watched the game. I'm not surprised Tampa Bay kept it close. I thought we were potentially going to get an upset, and for a while it looked like we were going to get an upset. Detroit rallied. They're really good, man. Like, I genuinely think Detroit can beat San Francisco this week, and I didn't think that a week ago. Defense is playing better. Jared Goff looks really good. Just Dan Campbell's done a great job with the Lions. I mean, talk about a team. He's brought a team that has not been good for the last 30 years. And he comes in and establishes a championship culture immediately. And now they're a game away from the Super Bowl. It's incredible. I know they're an NFC North rival, but I'm not cheering for San Francisco. I am kind of cheering for Detroit to win. I'm not cheering for San Francisco to make the Super Bowl. So, Tampa Bay, it was a nice run. I don't know where they go from here because I'm not convinced they have a window similar to Green Bay or Detroit because a lot of their guys are older. They don't have a young core. They have some good young players, but Mike Evans is getting older. A lot of their guys are, Levante David's getting older. You're going to have to pay Devin White. O-line's not great. Don't have a run game. Baker's limited. I like Baker, but he is limited. So Tampa, if I had to pick a team to win the NFC South next year, I would probably pick Tampa. But this feels like your ceiling right now is maybe 10-7, getting the divisional round. I don't see you winning the NFC and getting to a Super Bowl not with this core. So let's get to conference championship preview. So let's start with the AFC. Baltimore, Kansas City. Baltimore should win this game. Now, I've counted out Kansas City. Well, not twice. I picked them to beat Miami. But I counted them out last week, and they proved me wrong. I don't think we're going to get the same thing. Buffalo's defense was incredibly banged up. I mean, they made Travis Kelce look really good, and Travis Kelce has been a shell of himself this year. I know he's a Hall of Fame player, but Kelce's a shell of what he used to be. He might hang it up after this year, honestly. And they made him look really good. They made a lot of players on the Chiefs look really good, and we know this isn't the most talented Chiefs team. Buffalo wasn't great defensively down the stretch, and they were incredibly banged up. It's not the case in Baltimore. Baltimore has one of the best defense in the NFL. They've allowed, I think, less than 16 points or less than 17 points per game at home this season. This feels like a tough game for tough matchup for Kansas City. Baltimore is able to get pressure, and Kansas City's offensive line isn't great. Like, how many times this year has Mahomes ran for his life? I think this could get ugly, as stupid as that sounds, because I hate counting out Andy Reid and Mahomes. But I'm going to take Baltimore to win this game. I don't know if Kansas City is going to be able to score enough points. Baltimore's defense is really good. They're going to be able to get a pass rush on Mahomes. And do you trust their weapons to make plays against Baltimore's back seven? Like, I could see a scenario where Baltimore is able to get pressure with just 4 and drop 7. Do you think Kelce is going to take the game over? Do you think MVS is going to take the game over? I sure don't. And then on the other side, Kansas City will make stops against Baltimore, but Lamar should make enough plays to win this game. So I'm going to go with Baltimore. I do think it's going to be close. Right now, Baltimore is, I think, a 3-point favorite. 4 points. It's gone up. That feels about right. Maybe Chiefs +4, but I think this is going to be a field goal game. And then NFC Championship, where San Francisco is a huge favorite. The Niners are a 7-point favorite right now. That feels way too high. I really want to pick Detroit. I like the way they've been playing since the playoffs started. Really since, I think, that game against Green Bay. I think that's the last game Detroit lost. I could be wrong about that. No, they lost to Dallas. But their defense is playing well. I think Aiden Hutchinson could be a problem for the 49ers. Like, I would just line them up not opposite Trent Williams, but on the other side of Trent Williams. And I could see a scenario where he takes the game over. However, Shanahan, I expect to have a different game plan this week. I don't really know what he was doing against Green Bay. He was thoroughly outcoached against LaFleur. And I expect him to go back to his roots and run the ball, especially if it rains this week, which is something he did not do against Green Bay. He didn't run the ball that much. I think he'll do that against Detroit. But even if they have to throw, I think San Francisco's passing attack matches up well with Detroit's secondary. It's not a great secondary. And I don't think Debo will play, but Brandon Ayuk should be able to make plays. George Kittle should be able to make plays. I think McCaffrey can make plays in the run game. Like, San Francisco should be much better offensively. They've had a week now. But I'll be honest, I was kind of discouraged with what I saw from San Francisco on both sides of the ball last week. They really couldn't get Green Bay to punt until the fourth quarter. And Green Bay really didn't do anything special, but they were still able to move the ball on San Francisco. They were able to run the ball on San Francisco. Aaron Jones ran for over 100 yards. First time in over 50 games that happened against San Francisco. So I think Detroit could run on San Francisco. And if the run's working, I think Dan Campbell will stick with it. The problem is I don't trust Jared Goff outside. It's a proven track record that he's not good outdoors. And that's a problem. And that's why I'm going to pick the 49ers to win. I don't feel good about that. I feel better about Baltimore than I do. Because I think Baltimore has a favorable matchup against Kansas City. I don't think San Francisco has a favorable matchup against Detroit. And I don't like picking against Dan Campbell right now, but I don't trust Jared Goff I don't trust Jared Goff outside, especially if rain could be involved. So I think, and I feel like we're due for a Baltimore San Francisco Super Bowl. I've said that for weeks. These are the best two teams in football right now. And it just feels like we're destined to have these teams in the Super Bowl. So those are my picks this week. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the Baseball Hall of Fame. So the ballot came out. The ballot was established or whatever, voted on. And we have 3 inductees. And I don't have a problem with any of the 3 getting in. So let's look. Adrian Beltre got in first ballot. I'm shocked he got 95.1% of the vote. I didn't think it would be that high. I thought he'd be closer to 85%, and he got 95. But it makes sense. He's one of like 13 players to eclipse 3,000 hits. I think eclipse 400 home runs and 1,700 RBIs. He's one of 13 players. And of those 13, I think 11 of them, no, it's like 9 or 7. I think it was 7 of the 13 are in the Hall of Fame, and all of them, I think, were first ballot. There were a handful that were steroid users, and then there are a handful who aren't eligible yet for the Hall of Fame. And so I'm not surprised Beltre got in first ballot. I'm surprised he got so much consideration from the voters. Second is Todd Helton, who finished with 79.7%. I'm really surprised at that. Not that Helton got in. I'm surprised at his vote total. I thought he would eclipse 80%. And he barely got in. He barely crossed the 75% mark. And I don't get it. Dude was one of the top first basemen of his time. Got in on his 6th year on the ballot. He should have been in probably a couple years ago. Should have been in last year. So good for Todd Helton. I've always liked Todd Helton. I like the Rockies. And then third is Joe Mauer. And I think I said last week, don't be surprised if Mauer gets in. And here he is getting in. I originally, when I looked at this ballot, I thought Beltre I was like, he's probably a Hall of Famer. But I doubt he gets in first ballot. And when I saw Joe Mauer's name, I was like, oh, first ballot. And then when I saw their numbers, I flipped. I said, okay, Beltre's easily first ballot. And I was like, Joe Mauer, he should get in. He might have to wait because his numbers aren't terrific. He had a little over 2,000 hits. He finished with 2,100, only 143 home runs, and 900 RBIs. That's not great. But you have to remember he's a catcher. And I think toward the end of his career, I'll say I think he fell off. And he didn't play his entire career at catcher. But the thing going for him was that he was one of the best catchers of his time. You know, aside from Mauer, what catchers were better than him? Buster Posey kind of took over for Mauer toward 2012, 2013 as the best catcher in baseball, especially the best offensive catcher in baseball. But Mauer from 2005 to 2010 or 11, the dude was the best catcher in baseball and the best offensive catcher in baseball. Like he won 3 batting titles. I don't think any other catcher has done that. He's one of 3 catchers to win AL MVP since 1978. The one that won in 1978, I don't remember who it was, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. The second is Pudge Rodriguez, who is in the Hall of Fame, and then the third is Joe Mauer. So Mauer, I'm really happy for him. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm a little surprised he got in on his first year on the ballot. I thought he would need a couple years. But he's a feel-good story. He's from Minnesota. He played with the Twins. Everyone liked him. So I'm not totally shocked, but I am pretty surprised. So let's talk about the rest of the ballot. I think Billy Wagner got hosed. This was his 9th year on the ballot. He was 5 votes shy, or I believe 5 votes shy of 75%. He finished with 73.8%. So he added to his vote total. I believe he added around 5% to his vote total. Let me look that up. Yeah, he added almost 6% to his vote total. Last year, he was closer to 68%. I thought Wagner was going to get in, and I was wrong. It makes me wonder if he's ever going to get in, but I did some homework, and there have been, in the last 30 years, there have been 16 instances where a player eclipsed 70% of the ballot and did not get 75%. In 12 of those 16 instances, the player was inducted into the Hall of Fame the next year. So, pretty good track record for Billy Wagner. I almost said Billy Maurer. Billy Wagner. That's about a 75% chance you're going to get in next year. Not even just, which is funny because you need 75% of the vote to get in. But of the other, it only gets better for Billy Maurer because the other 4 instances, one guy who didn't get in the next year, he got in 5 years later through a veterans committee. He had used up his last year of eligibility. The year he eclipsed 70%, but didn't get 75. So pretty good track record there. 2 other instances were Curt Schilling, and I believe I talked about Curt Schilling last week. Curt Schilling eclipsed 70% twice and didn't get in because of political reasons. Schilling is an outspoken conservative. The media does not like that, so I think they made him wait. He was probably going to get in.